This summer, I am on a mission to transform my yard from boring suburban lawn into a wildlife habitat that also looks great. I have a lot of projects in the works. My biggest project so far has been replacing my lawn with a native wildflower meadow. I made a video if you want to check out that before and after. I'm also working on planting some shrubs to replace invasive ones. I'll be making a video about that soon. Today I'm sharing my latest project where I've ripped out invasive English ivy and I've replaced it with natives. Not only will this support wildlife, but eventually it will help manage stormwater in my yard. Let's dive in. But before we dive in, let me introduce myself. I'm Beth, and I'm transforming my suburban yard into a wildlife garden filled with native plants. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe and follow along with my progress. Okay, let's get back to it. So a little background. When we moved into this house 4 years ago, the area next to our front door was covered in English ivy. There was a Korean spice viburnum and this overgrown yew that looked like it was devouring the front door. So the first thing I did was I tried to prune back the yew a little bit, but ended up getting kind of over enthusiastic and just ended up cutting the whole thing down. So that's completely gone now. And then I also decided to try and prune that Korean spice viburnum. That one, I ended up just changing my mind that I wanted to replace it with a native. So last year, I replaced that with an American plum. So the yew and the viburnum are gone, and I've got an American plum here now. So I knew that I wanted to replace the ivy with some kind of native plants. English ivy is invasive in much of the eastern United States, and it can climb trees and kill them. So if you have English ivy in your yard, be sure that you keep it off your trees. And even if it weren't invasive, I still just really dislike it because it seems to take over really quickly. I can't tell you how many times I've walked by someone's yard and they've got all their beautiful plants just absolutely drowning in English ivy. People plant ground covers, I think because they want something that's low maintenance, which can be true to some extent with English ivy, but if you are not on top of it, it can get out of hand really quickly. You really have to stay on top of it or it will spread into other plants, and before you know it, your yard is just nothing but ivy. But anyway, back to my yard. So the tricky thing with this area is that it's part dense shade and part full sun. So half is in the shade of my neighbor's house all day long, but then the rest gets full sun pretty much all day from like 10 a.m. on. So I decided to plant the shady half with a mix of sedges and hostas. Hostas are one of the few non-native plants that I'm keeping in my yard. I really like them. I think they're really pretty and they're well behaved and they're low maintenance. So that's a win in my book. But on the other side, I decided to do a ground cover of tall thimbleweed or Anemone virginiana. Since I have a really young tree on that side, right now it's sun, but I wanted something that could take the full sun, and then as the tree gets larger and eventually puts more shade into that area, I wanted something that would be able to handle that transition. And tall thimbleweed fits that bill. It can definitely take some sun and it can also handle a lot of shade. I've also since decided that I actually would like to put some thimbleweed on the sedge and hosta side that I have already planted, but that's a project for next year. I started by removing all the ivy, which I didn't film. I'm sorry about that. I took it out manually, a combo of pruning with my pruning shears and just pulling it out by hand. It's popped up again here and there, but really not too bad. Overall, I would say that pulling it manually was pretty effective. So after removing the ivy, My first step was to dig out a shallow bioswale, which is just a kind of lower area where water tends to collect. Part of my plan for this area is to eventually divert rain from a downspout just on the other side of the fence, and that will flow through this bioswale to a rain garden that I will eventually plant in the front yard. I wanted to dig out an area where water could collect around the American plum, which usually lives along stream banks and really likes a lot of moisture. It's not connected to the downspout yet. I'll do that next year when I'm creating the rain garden, but I did want to dig out that bioswale before I started planting the ground cover here. I added some river rocks to the bioswale. I have a few goals with adding rocks. Initially, my main goal here is just to keep the bioswale from becoming an ugly, muddy mess filled with weeds. But longer term, rocks and plants eventually, once I add some more plants, those help water to slow down. So slowing down flowing water is going to prevent erosion and increase the amount of water that gets absorbed into the ground as the water passes. So that's all really important if we want to try and capture storm water, which is one of my goals here. So I also added some larger limestone rocks, which are going to create a little dam around the plum tree so that I can, again, hold the water there just a little bit longer and give that plum tree more water as it absorbs into the ground around the tree. I used the dirt that I removed from that bioswale area to build up the banks on either side, but especially in front of this American plum. So this area is where I'm planting the tall thimbleweed, which actually likes drier soils. So by elevating that a little bit, I'm creating a slightly drier site for them. Next, I added in my plants. So I used hostas that I had elsewhere in my garden, like the one that I took out to plant the oak leaf hydrangea. Hostas were the first plant that I ever divided, and I quickly learned they're super forgiving about being divided and moved, so I wasn't afraid to kind of move them around a little bit. After that, I added in some Carex radiata or star sedge, which I had moved from my wildflower meadow because I just decided there was too much in there. I mentioned in my front yard video, or my front yard meadow video, that a lot of them actually died because I wasn't really careful about taking care of them once I removed them. So I may need to add in some more next year. We'll see what happens. So by the way, I decided to expand the sedge meadow beyond just where I had the ivy and into this lawn area that was adjacent to it. Because, okay, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret about grass, and you're not gonna believe it, but grass is a plant. I know, it's shocking. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't it just that carpet that's for outside? But no, it's a plant. Okay, jokes aside though, I do think sometimes it feels like people really forget that it's a plant. They just try growing grass in places where it has no chance of staying alive. So anyway, in my yard, I have some lawn that is trying its darndest to grow in the shade of my neighbor's house. And then on the other side is a tree. So it literally never gets sun ever, like ever. And this poor sad grass, it just like, it's not the right plant for the right place. Like even if I wasn't trying to replace my lawn with natives, I still would not plant grass here. It's never gonna grow well. It's not the right plant for that place. So rant over, I did decide I'm just gonna continue those sedges and hostas into that lawn area as well. And those love shade and they're gonna do really well there. So on the other side where there's full sun, I put about 20 or so Anemone virginiana. I love this plant. It spreads really slowly and it makes a beautiful ground cover. The foliage is really pretty and it gets these beautiful white flowers in early summer or late spring. And the seed heads are really cool too. So I had a couple plants that I had collected seeds from. So a couple of these are my original plants and the rest are the babies that I started from seed in winter of 2023. I saw another garden with tall thimbleweed mixed with sedges. And so now I'm maybe thinking I want to pull some sedges into this side too, rather than just having a monoculture of the anemone. But again, I think that's maybe for next year. So we'll see how it goes and we'll see what I decide to do with that. But I think it might be a nice way to sort of tie the shady side of the yard to the sunnier side. And there are definitely some sedges that can handle a little more sun. So we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, after all that digging and planting, here's what it looks like now. I'm excited to get the bioswale connected to the downspout and create that rain garden, but I think this is a good start for now. And I'll need something to do next summer, right? Okay, that's it for now. I'm in the process of removing some holly shrubs and replacing them with natives. And I'm also planning an update on the boxwoods that I pruned earlier in the season. So that's coming up. I also really want to see if I could DIY a hypertufa planter. So be sure and subscribe so you can see if that's a total disaster. Okay, see you next time.